Hey, what's poppin', everybody? Welcome back to the FNB App Academy. I am your host. My name is Karabo Mohole. All right, so this is an amazing phase that we are in right now, which is the intermediate phase, covering holistically JavaScript and API. And of course, we just wrapped up the previous session, which focused on design thinking. And today's session, we'll be looking into APIs plus data inputting plus processing. All right, I can't wait to start on this amazing session that we have in store for you guys. But before we get into that, let us take a look at the previous App of the Year event. Check it out.
We are young, we are floating like the sun. We are golden, we are young, we are floating like the sun. We are golden. When things are right and reach, you bring them back to me, back to me. We gonna live forever, forever. The afterlife. We gonna live forever, forever.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is the 13th annual App of the Year Awards, proudly brought to you by FNB. Is FNB in the house? Yes. My name is Donovan Goliath. I will be your host this evening. As you know, this is Africa's biggest awards evening for tech and app developers. So tonight it is all about identifying and rewarding innovation in the tech space, specifically mobile apps.
Back to me.
For us as FNB, we've come almost 360 degrees. So just over 10 years ago, we won this award, and we're delighted to be back sponsoring the platform that gave us that boost in our own app space. This year, we had 803 apps that applied to participate in this adventure. And I think it's testament again to the fact that there's a broad base of people who are really looking to ply their trade in a really exciting market.
We are floating.
So in the category rather best consumer solution, the winner is Checkers 6060.
Like the sun. Give me.
Iris app. Genu. October Health. Well done. Every single one of these right here, every single one deserves an opportunity, deserves this prize right now. But where my hand stops, that is exactly who the winner will be. Ladies and gentlemen, FNB App of the Year 2024 goes to none other than Metric Life! Yes, man! Metric Life does it once again! Come on! Yes! Here we go! Give that young man all the praise! Absolutely well deserved! What a beautiful, beautiful evening!
All right, such an amazing, vibrant video. Great just to see the opportunities that the App of the Year Awards has and opportunities for up-and-coming developers. All right, so as always, we'd love to hear about your engagement on social media. So please don't forget to hashtag FNB App Academy. So with that in mind, let us see what you guys have been up to on social media this week. All right, so right now I'll be handing it over to Bilal in our Durban studio. This will be his second session and he'll be focusing on APIs plus data inputting plus processing. Bilal, over to you, sir. Enjoy, guys.
Hello and welcome back to a new lesson of the App Academy. My name is Bilal Katrada. I'm the founder of IT Varsity. I'm also an award-winning software developer and app developer. In case you missed that, I thought I'd put that out here. So today we're going to be talking about a very important aspect of app development and something that is a bit confusing and surrounded by mystery for those who don't know about it. What we're going to be talking about is APIs, user input, and data processing. Now, what does this all mean? What exactly is an API? If it makes you nervous, don't worry, don't stress it. I'm going to explain to you in the simplest terms what an API is and how the API is instrumental in communicating between your app and the server. Why do we need a server when the app runs on your phone? We're going to talk about that also. So we're going to be demystifying a lot of this. Don't stress it. You're going to be quite clued up in all this by the time we are done with this lesson. Okay, so let's start with a very simple analogy. And this analogy is of a food outlet. You walk into a typical food outlet like the one you see on the screen here. It could be something simple. It could be a privately owned, or it could be a McDonald's or a KFC or any food outlet. Think about what happens at that point. When you enter the food outlet, what you are seeing is the beautiful front of the food outlet. You are seeing the beautiful designs, you're seeing the layout, you're seeing the colors, the corporate colors. If you walk into, for example, a KFC versus a McDonald's, you see a distinct difference in the whole layout, you see a distinct difference in the colors, and this is all very deliberate. This is planned to make you feel welcome, right? What do you do next? You walk up to the counter and there's the person smiling at you, dressed up in all the beautiful corporate clothing in the corporate colors, and they are ready to take your order. Behind them, you see there's a menu there. So you look at the menu, you make your choice, what you want, you take that idea, the choices that you have, and you communicate it to this person. And they take your order, you make payment, and then something happens. A whole series of steps actually kicks in from that point when you place your order. What are those steps? Let's take a look at it. So first and foremost, you will give your order to the person at the counter. She will take that order and then she will communicate it to the back end, the part of the food outlet that you cannot see, that you cannot enter. And that is the kitchen. It's the part where your food is processed. So if you ordered a chicken burger, for example, that goes into the back end, and when the chef sees what is there, when the grill chef sees what is there, he knows exactly what you need, and so he starts preparing that meal. But he can't prepare that meal without what? Ingredients, right? So you've guessed that, right? So he needs ingredients. Where does he get the ingredients from? He goes to the storeroom or the fridge or the freezer, and then he'll pull out the chicken fillet, and then he'll pull out the lettuce and the buns and what goes on inside the burger, and then he'll bring it back, and then he will prepare the whole meal. And what happens next is that once the meal is done, he will send it back to the front end, and then a large number will appear there, the number on your slip, and the person at the counter will call out that number, you collect your food, and you enjoy it. So that's the whole process that takes place from the time that you enter the food outlet till the time you get your food. So let's recap it again. You enter, you are seeing the front of the food outlet. You go to the person, you place your order, that order is transferred to the kitchen, the chef looks at the order, he goes one step back into the storeroom, freezer, wherever, and he brings the ingredients, puts the ingredients together, processes it. Remember that word, processes it by cooking it, by putting everything together, by compiling your burger, by pouring your drink into the cup, and then he transfers that to the front end, to the front of the takeaway where you are waiting and you collect your food and off you go with it. Now let's take a look at this a little more closely from a perspective of software engineering, from the perspective of app development, because that's what you guys are becoming. You are becoming app developers. So what is happening here is when you enter the takeaway, this is what in development terms we call the front end. So that's the part of the food outlet where the user, which is you, the customer, interacts with the food outlet. Now, you cannot, as the customer, go into the storeroom and start compiling your own things. That's illegal to do. Or you can't go into the kitchen and start preparing your own meal. You could be a professional chef. Nobody cares. It's illegal for you to go past that counter. If you do, they're probably going to call the police for you and you're going to end up in prison. So you know that you've been given this interface. Now, what the food outlets do is they spend a lot of money. They spend millions in making that interface beautiful and attractive and somewhere where you feel welcome. And it's not just in the deco and the colors and the graphics, it's also in the way that the person interacts with you. They've been specifically trained, I don't know if you know that, they've been specifically trained to be friendly. Even if a person comes there who is a bit rude, who is not very friendly, these people are trained to deal with people like that. So they take your order. And they are also trained when it comes to how they take the order, what they offer you. You'll notice that if you just order a burger, then they'll ask you, would you like a drink with this? None of this is random. It's all very specific. It's all very deliberate. So they take that information and they transfer it. Now, how they transfer it to the back end is also very, very specific, because the communication needs to be 100% accurate and it needs to be timely, right? So you cannot, for example, order a mild chicken burger and by mistake the order that goes in the back is a hot chicken burger. You cannot do that because she cannot afford to do that, because the customer is going to be very unhappy. You, the customer, are going to be very unhappy. So the communication needs to be accurate. It needs to be timely, meaning she can't take her own time communicating that order to the back, because you need your food and you need it right away. If you're hungry, you need your food right away. So it needs to be quick. It needs to be accurate. And then when that is received on the back end, the chef must be able to now look at that order and to be able to understand it and to be able to process that. If he receives something that he cannot understand, obviously he can't prepare that food. So on the front end, the order is checked and then it is sent to the back end. Now the back end is everything that happens past that front of the store, beyond the person who's taking your order. The moment payment is made and she writes the order on a slip and she passes it to the back, or in many cases nowadays they don't even have to write it, right? Because it's all electronically transferred. So behind that person there's a wall, and sometimes like in your KFCs you can see the action happening. Now everything behind that wall is known as the back end of the store. It's the part where you don't, as I said earlier, you don't get to enter, you don't have any control, you don't get to see, you don't get to process anything there. It's all automated on the back end. And that back end is made up of two parts, as we discussed. One is the part where the cooking is done, where the chef is, the processing part. But there's also another very important part where the storage is happening. In computer terms, that's your data. So the chef needs certain ingredients. He goes to the back, to the storeroom, to the freezer, brings that ingredients to process. So that is now processed and then sent back to you. So let's take a look at it again. You walk into the front end You interact with the front end of the store, you place your order, you give information. That information is just then transferred to the back end. At the back end, you've got the chef, who's the processor, who now takes that information that's given to you and who now makes a list of everything that he needs in order to fulfill your request. Then he goes to the storage where the ingredients are stored and brings those ingredients, processes them, prepares your meal, and then sends it to the front end. At the front end, a bag is given to you, the person smiles, enjoy, and then you take your food and off you go. That's the interaction now, the interplay between front end and back end. Okay, now that you understand that, let's take this analogy and extend it to what happens with a mobile app or an app that you are using on your computer. Now, remember, when you are using an app on your phone, let's take a typical app like TikTok. None of the videos that you see on TikTok live on your device. That's obvious, right? What happens is that when you open the app, your device now sends information to TikTok and says the user has opened the app, show the user the latest videos that conform to the user's needs and the user's preferences, and that's where you see the videos coming in. So those videos are coming from the server, from TikTok server onto your device, and you can play them, you can watch them, you can do whatever you want with it. Now, this is how pretty much every app works, except certain apps which don't need a connection to the server, like the calculator app on your phone. It's just a simple calculator. You put in some numbers, you do the calculations, it gives you an answer. There's no need to contact the server. But with pretty much every app that requires a lot of data, there's a communication with the server. Now, when you are talking about apps like that, and 9 out of 10 times, your app that you're building is going to be communicating to a server. Now let's look at what that communication looks like, keeping in mind the analogy of the food outlet. Okay, so as a user, you are using the front end of the app. So the front end is the part of the app that you interact with. Just like the entrance, just like the front end of a food outlet. So the front end is the part that's supposed to be user-friendly. It's the part that's supposed to be easy for the users to use. It's supposed to make them feel welcome. It's supposed to make them feel like they are able to use this app without much instruction, without an instruction manual. Basically, it needs to be user-friendly. Right. So you can interact with that front end in any number of ways. Perhaps you can use a computer, perhaps you can use a tablet, perhaps you can use a phone. It's up to you. That's why today you've got apps that you can use on any one of those. For example, WhatsApp. You can use WhatsApp on your phone, but you can also download and use WhatsApp on your computer. And when you send and receive messages on your phone, you see the same messages appearing on your computer and vice versa. Now, how does WhatsApp do this? The way that WhatsApp does this is because there's a common thing between your computer and your device, which is the server. Now, the part of the app that, like I said, that you are interacting with, the WhatsApp app, is the front end. Now, let's see what happens. When you interact with the front end of the app, that information is sent to the back end. Think of the chef. Now, the back end receives this. You've sent a message. Let's say you opened your contact, Mum, and you typed in a message, hey, hi Mum, how are you doing? And you hit send. So that message is now sent to the server. The server receives this. And it doesn't just receive the text that you sent. It receives a whole lot of other information with that. And that information is all encrypted. So it receives the sender's name and the sender's ID, including the message, and the recipient's name, recipient's ID, etc. So all of those, and this is, I'm highly simplifying it. So it's received this information. Sender, Bob, has sent a message to his mum who is in his contacts, and this is the message that has been sent. Now it needs to know what to do with this. So what does the processor do with this? Next, it goes into its database. It looks into the database and it finds who is this person, mum, that Bob is sending this message to. What is that user's actual ID on the app? What is the historical data with this person? So it goes and it fetches that information, brings out, this person, mum, on Bob's contacts is user number 854321, for example, who is on our database. We know who this person is. So then the app processor will, on the back end, will take that information and it will compile a message. As if, in the old days, you take an envelope, you put the note inside, you seal the envelope, you write the address, and then you put it in the post box. That's what the processor is doing. He does this, and then he sends that information back to the front end. Now, there are two front ends involved here on the receipt. See, on sending, the only front end of the app that was involved is Bob's, because Bob is initiating this conversation. So it goes to him, and then when it comes back, it's sent to two people. One is the recipient, Bob's mum, and the second is to Bob himself. He gets the double tick. So the double tick means that this message has been sent. So the user will receive that from the processor. So let's take a look at it again. You got the front end of the app, and then you've got the back end, right? You've got the back end and the storage. Both together, you can say, forms the back end of the app. The storage is where the information is stored, and the back end processor is where everything happens. That's like the chef. So the chef needs ingredients, the chef needs data. So the back end needs data, it goes to the database, brings that data, and then processes that data and sends it back. So every interaction that you have with pretty much every app that you use follows the exact same pattern. Open up TikTok. What happens? Your app, the front end, sends a message to the back end. User has opened the app, user wants to see videos. The processor goes to the database or wherever all the videos are stored and looks at the user's requirements, the user's preferences, and brings back videos, maybe the first few videos. And then it bundles up those videos and sends it with the comments, with the description, etc. to the user's front end. The user's front end of the app picks up this video, receives it, and displays it along with all the other information. Comments are in their place, description is in its place, title is in its place, it's all there. And then the user is able to watch that video. When the user swipes, now a new instruction is sent. And all this is happening blazing fast. A new instruction is sent, again, back to the processor, from the processor to the database, where all the videos are stored. The database sends back the video is displayed to the user on the front end. All this, like I said, is happening blazing fast. It's the same if you open up and use Instagram or any other app like a chat app or Facebook, social media, even video games. There's a lot of video games that interact with the server, particularly multiplayer games where you open the app, someone else in another part of the world opens the app, and your interaction. All that interacting takes place via the back end. So just to recap, the part of the app that you use is the front end. It's like the place in the food outlet where you place your order. Once you interact with that front end, some data is sent to the back end. The back end is the part of the app that you can't see, is the part that lives on the server. Now the back end is where this data is processed. And this data is more often than not stored in a database. And that complete back end, the complete server application is known as the back end. Once the information is processed, something is sent out. Now, let's take another scenario, just one more scenario, and you will be done with this slide. Let's say you are on TikTok and you are watching a video and you decide to place a comment. So you click on the comment button, you type in your comment. Up till that point, it's all front end, right? Everything that happens there happens on the front end. But then the moment you hit that send button, the moment you do that, now the back end gets involved. That information is sent to the back end. So your user ID, the ID of the video, the time that you sent it, the information that you typed in there, whether it's text, emojis, whatever you put, is all sent. The processor looks at that and says, oh, okay, this is a comment that needs to go on certain video at a certain time in a certain order, and this is the message. That is taken and stored into the database. And then the next time you open that, the database sends that information back to the processor, back to you. So this is the whole interplay between the front end and the back end. I hope you're getting a better understanding now of how front ends and back ends operate and why there's a need for a front end and a back end. Remember, the back end is the main controller. It's the one that links everything up. It's the one that links everyone up, whether it's your app on your mobile device or on your computer, whether it's yourself or the contacts on your WhatsApp list or your followers on social media. All of these people are linked via that back-end server. Now, the question you might be asking at this point is, how exactly does that communication happen between the front end of the app and the back end? Now, we know it happens via the internet, but what exactly is going on behind the scenes? Now, I'm going to explain that to you, not in too much of detail, but in enough detail that you will need as an app developer in order to create an app that talks to a back-end server. So let's go back to the kitchen, to the food outlet and the kitchen. When the person sitting at the counter sends that information through back to the back end, back to this kitchen, what happens there? There is a communication layer. And that communication layer is crucial to ensure that that communication is proper. That communication is timely, accurate, it's on time, and there's no mistakes in it. Now, how does this communication happen? It can happen in a number of different ways. If you look at an older food outlet or a more simple food outlet, what will she do? You'll notice the person will take your order on a piece of paper, maybe a sticky note, and that is then torn and it's stuck somewhere where the chef can see it. This is in the traditional way of doing it. Now, even this is not done in a haphazard way, because there is certain information that we as the customers don't really get to see, but everyone, from the person who is taking the order to the person who is processing the order at the till and collecting payment, to the chef, to the people working in the back end in the storage, all of these people understand that there is a very standard, uniform communication that needs to happen. For example, if you take a look at that slip, it will have, first and foremost, table number. Secondly, it will have order 1, order 2, order 3. And those orders are not always written in words. They're probably written in numbers. So if you look at the menu in many food outlets, you'll notice that the items on the menu have a number. 127, for example, is a burger that is mild. Maybe 127B is a burger that's medium, and then 127C will be a burger that's got hot sauce on it. So each item will probably have a number code that is attached to it. Now, that is how they do quick communications and seamless communications. Because, I mean, if they're communicating words, think about how difficult this will be and what kind of challenges they're going to face, right? So you're going to say, this person needs a burger that is mild. Sometimes the person's spelling is not good. Sometimes the handwriting is not good. So it goes back to the kitchen and the chef can't understand this and makes the wrong thing. It comes back and then there's a disaster. There's a very, very unhappy customer to deal with, right? So the communication needs to be standardized. It needs to be something that everybody understands. It needs to be something that minimizes errors. And it needs to be something that is verifiable. In other words, it needs to be free of errors. So at some point, somebody is checking that this is free of any errors. For example, let's say there are 120 items on the menu, and the person taking the order mistakenly orders 128. Now there's no such thing as a 128 on the menu. Now at some point this needs to be corrected, otherwise this is going to be a mistake. So those are the kind of errors that needs to be avoided. Okay, now that communication layer between the person taking the order and the person receiving the order is crucial. That's the one that is receiving the information, checking that the information is correct, that there's no errors in it, and then communicating that information correctly and quickly to the back end. You see that green section there, the communication / interface on the slides? Now that is the communication layer. In the technology world, we refer to that as the API, the application programming interface. It's the part that is the communication layer between the front end and the back end. So when a person uses your app and the app has some information to send to the back end, it doesn't send that information directly to the database or directly to the processor. It sends that information to that API. The API is the communication layer. He is the guy that receives the information, unpacks it, looks at it, sees that there's no errors in it. If there are errors, he will send it back and say, you know what, there's an error in this, there's something I don't understand. When everything is 100% correct, this guy will send it to the back end, and that's where everything is processed and sent back. So this application programming interface, the API, is a crucial part of your application. It's the main place where all the communication happens. So you could have 100,000 users on your app. You could have 200,000 users. They all talk to that API. That API safeguards the back end of your app from any problems, from any issues. Let's say somebody puts in some code in your app that is malicious. So the API protects that. It can detect malicious code coming in, and it protects the back end of your app from hackers and malicious people. And it also makes sure that information is timely and correct. Both ways communication. So whatever is coming from the front to the back, from the back to the front, is 100% correct. And it's very, very crucial for that. So let's go into understanding the API in a little more detail. We're going to start by looking at the flow of data between the front end and the back end. Now I need you to pay very careful attention to the next slide, because this is going to explain exactly how data flows from the front end to the back end and back again. So let's take the front end of your application. Like I said, it could be a mobile app, or it could be an app that a person uses on a computer. When a user interacts with that front end and hits submit, pushes some data that needs to go to the back end, what happens is that that data hits the API. Like we said earlier, the API is like the little policeman that stands there and receives all of that information and double checks that information, makes sure it's correct, makes sure it's authenticated, makes sure that there's nothing malicious about it, makes sure that it's something that the back end will understand. If the API doesn't understand anything, it rejects it and sends it back. Remember that. So if the API is happy and it understands the information, the next thing it does is that it sends that information to the back-end processor. Now the back-end processor then takes that information, and if it needs anything from the database, it connects with the database and it brings data back. Just like the chef going and getting ingredients. So whatever ingredients, whatever information it needs from the database, it brings back and it processes all of that information. Once that information is processed, these arrows are all playing havoc with me. Once that information is processed, it is now sent back to the API, remember? And that API receives the data from the back end and sends it to the correct person. You don't want information being sent to the wrong person. So the API keeps a track of all of that, who's sending the information and where that information needs to go. For example, if you're sending a message to mom, you don't want that message to go to somebody at work, because it's a sensitive information that you are sending. So the API is the one that guarantees that the information that's being received is correct and the information that is being sent is correct. So that is the interaction and the flow of data from front to back and then back again. So as you can see, let's take a look at the top there, right? So you've got your front end, which is your app. Then you've got the API, another very key component. That API then talks to the back end of your app, which is your processing and your database, your processor and your database. Now, in this course, as part of this course here, you are going to be learning this entire process and how to create something that works across the entire process. You are going to be building an app that not just operates on your front end, it's something that's going to operate on the front end as well as on the back end. And you're going to actually facilitate that communication. Now, if you're a bit nervous about this, if it makes you a bit intimidated and a bit overwhelmed, don't stress it. You've done so well up until this point. You've created the front end of your application. You've made the superhero app. You've made the Pine City Zoo app, which is incredible. Now you're going to be learning a bit of JavaScript, because JavaScript is the part that controls the entire front end and is what is the facilitator of that communication to the back end. And in the advanced version of this course, obviously you're going to build the back end of your application, and then you're going to build the API that talks to it. It's not that difficult, trust me. Now let's take a look at the technologies that are used at every stage. Now, as I explained earlier, you've done HTML and CSS. Now you're learning JavaScript. Those are all front-end technologies. Those apps that you are building are front-end apps. You're going to be building the calculator app now in JavaScript. Again, that's all the front end. So to build your front ends, you need HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. This is for a cross-platform app. You can also build your front end with a programming language like Swift for iOS or Java for Android devices. But it's my preference, and with our apps in my company, we build all our apps in JavaScript. And the reason is simple, because you write one app and you can deploy it to iOS or Android. You don't have to write two different apps, one for iOS and one for Android. It makes it much easier to maintain your apps that way also, because both platforms understand JavaScript perfectly. So we opted to do what we call cross-platform app development, which you probably came across in a previous lecture, probably the lecture done by Talha. So now you use, as I said, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Once your app sends an information to the API, a bit of information, that goes via HTTP. It's a protocol on the internet known as HTTP. Do you have to know a lot about this? No, not that much. You just have to know that this is the protocol that's being used. That protocol, you can think of it as a certain way of sending data. So for example, if I want to send an old-fashioned letter to you, there's a certain way of doing it. I take the letter, fold it, put it into an envelope, put a stamp, put the address, and I send it. If I don't obey those rules, for example, if I omit the stamp, or if I don't put in an address, it's going to be a disaster. My letter is going to go absolutely nowhere. So the HTTP protocol basically ensures that whatever you're sending to the API is going to be sent properly. It's like the postman. Then when it comes to the API itself, the API is something you're going to learn to make, and it has its own functions. You can tell the API to get, post, put, delete, or patch data. Now, what is the meaning of each of these? We will look at in a later lesson when you start actually building that API. But just to give you a high-level understanding, when you talk about get, when you say to the API, get something, I think that's simple to understand, right? It means I need some information and I want you to go and retrieve that information for me from the database. So the API sends that information to the processor, which then sends it to the database and brings it back. Let's say you are in your business and you need the records of a specific client. So you'd say to the API, get. You'll send a get request to the API. So the API will go and fetch that client information and present it to you. Post means to send information, just like you would post a letter. Now, if you are sending information to the API, you'll use a method called post. You'll say to the API, please post this information. In other words, send it to the database. So if you are adding a new contact to your contact list, to your in the cloud contact list, you will post that to the API. Put. Now put is similar to post, but put doesn't post an entire bit of information or an entire record. It posts only a part of a record. Now what does this mean? Let's say you've got a contact on your database that lives on the server, and this contact changes their phone number. They said, hey, you know what? I've changed my phone number. Please update it. Now you will say to the API that I need to not change or not create this new user. I need to update an existing user. I need to update just this person's phone number or some detail that has changed. Now that's what put does. Put is like edit, and post is like create somebody new. So create a new record will be post, and edit a current record will be put. Delete, simple. You can understand what delete is. Delete means delete a record from the database, and patch means to fix something that is broken on the record. So there's some corrupted data there. You can fix it using patch. Now those functions you will learn about in more detail in the advanced version of this bootcamp, of this App Academy. Now let's take a look at the back end. What happens on the back end? What kind of technologies do you use there? So you're probably familiar with languages like Java, PHP, Python, .NET. All of these languages are used to create backends of your applications. So you're seeing the difference now. HTML, CSS, JavaScript, front end. Java, PHP, Python, back end. Then you've got the last step, which is the database. Now there you would come across SQL databases and NoSQL databases, or SQL and NoSQL, depends how you call it. Now typically you would use databases like MySQL, PostgreSQL, MS SQL. Those are basically just databases that you can use to store your information. In some cases you will use NoSQL. We'll discuss all of that in the more advanced version of this course. What is NoSQL? And those are basically places where you store data, but a lot of data. If you've got tons and tons of data, you will typically use NoSQL. So let's have a look at it again. Front end, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Back end, Java, PHP, .NET, Python. And for your databases, you will have to make a decision, SQL or NoSQL, and then you'll choose which database you want to work with there. So that's your full stack development. So you know what they mean now when they talk about full stack development. This, what you're seeing on the slide, is the full stack. It's not just front end, it's not just back end, it's all three: front end, API, and back end. And that's what you are learning in the App Academy. So don't stress it. It's going to be a fantastic ride for you. It's going to be enjoyable, and it's not going to be that tough. Okay, so there you have it. What is an API and how is data processed in your application? What is the interplay between the front end and the back end? And just to recap, remember, if you are ever confused, if you're ever stuck, think about a food outlet, because that's something we all understand, right? You go into your food outlet, you place an order, that order is communicated via a communication layer, and that is communicated to the back end. At the back end, your order is processed. Any ingredients they need, they get from the storage, and they bring that information, they prepare your meal. It's sent again via that communication layer to the front end, and that information is handed to you. Now, as a person who is developing an app, who is building an app company around that, you need to understand this much around the technology. You need to understand, firstly, that your front end needs to be something that is user-friendly. It's something that your users are able to understand and use without any issues. Now, you've done a whole lecture, you've been exposed to a lecture on front-end development, right, on user interface design. I'm not going to delve into that. So once that is, and there's something you need to remember and understand. If your app is not user-friendly, people will not use it. If your app is user-friendly, people will use it. So that's important. So your front end of your app talks to the API. The API sends that information to the processor on the back end. That processor brings back whatever information it needs from the database or stores information into the database. It's then bundled, passed to the API, which then passes that information to the front end of your application. Now, all of this is done blazing fast. In the next few lessons, upcoming lessons, you're going to create a very simple contact book app. And that contact book app is going to take you on that complete journey. So you are going to expose to the user a front end with a form for entering user data. You enter the user data, you hit submit. That data will be sent to an API, and that API will send it to the backend processor, which then bundles the data and stores it into the database. But your users will also have the ability to retrieve information that they've stored onto that contact book app. So if they do a search, that search information again will be sent to the API, will be sent to the backend processor, will be sent to the database. The person you are searching for example, you're searching for Tim. Tim's data will be sent back to the processor, who will then bundle it, send it to the API, back to the app, and on the app it will display Tim's contact information, whatever contact information was stored in there. Now this is going to be extremely enjoyable. It's going to be a lot of fun. Trust me, we're going to show you the front end, and then we're going to show you the back end, and we're going to show you a holistic picture of both and how they work together. You're going to actually create that. So hang in there, and I hope you enjoy these lessons. And as always, if you have any challenges, we're right here. Talk to us.
All right, guys, that was an amazing session right there from Bilal, all the way from our Durban studios, focusing on API, plus data inputting, plus processing. Thank you so much, Bilal, for that amazing session. That's it for today's lesson. All the best. See you guys next time. Peace.